and welcome to Where Are They Now? I'm your host, Heather Lindstedt from the Chelmsford High class of 1985. Today I am joined by Freddie Higgins from the class of 2014. Freddie, thank you for joining me here today.
Pleasure. Thank you for having me.
Yeah. So are you a proud CHS alum of what you accomplished during your 4 years at Chelmsford High?
Very proud. I mean, the teachers I've had were great. The friends I've made have been pretty good. I mean, I still keep in touch with a lot of people from high school. A few of them I'm actually still really good friends with. And the best part is it was pretty much an adventure. I thought I knew what I wanted to do after going there and going to college, and it turned out to be a complete another curveball later. And I think that's just the whole matter of life. I mean, the whole of life is just a learning experience. You just never know where it's going to take you sometimes or what your experiences are going to be. And it was made a little more difficult for the fact that early on in my life, I was diagnosed with autism, and socially, I was a little socially challenged. Those who don't know, autism is a disability per se that affects how someone socializes, develops, and behaves, more or less. And naturally, it just socializing with people like I am with you right now, it comes a bit more difficult than with others. And I was blessed very early on in my childhood, after my parents received a diagnosis, that I surrounded myself with typical friends, and as a result, I became very social with others. And I mean, I would have my autism moments, and I still do today, but I've always been very social. I mean, I was able to get a driver's license later. I've been able to have a fine line of jobs, and I got a college degree later. And
we'll talk about that, but was it the environment though too? Did you always feel comfortable in your environment, especially at Chelmsford, and some of the teachers that were there for you?
Oh yeah, absolutely. I think Mr. Holleran was a real comforting person to be around. He was my study skills teacher. It's weird because I've been in college for so long, I'm so tempted to say professor.
Yeah.
But I mean, he was always a joy, very funny guy as well. But best part is I could always come to him for if I had problems. I'm sorry, I forgot.
No, you were right. I was asking about the environment, because then you also...
Oh, yes.
So you had him, but then you also swam, right? Was that another environment that you obviously chose that helped you, feel comfortable in the social part of it?
Yeah. When I was on the swim team, we operated like a family, because we would swim at the little Y for 2 hours, and maybe 2 or 3 times a week, maybe twice a week, we'd have swim meets. Every Friday night, we would go out to get dinner. Nights before swim meets, we would have a pasta dinner at someone's house, and then do another swim meet. Sometimes we'd have swim meets back to back, so we'd have 2 pasta dinners in a row. And so I wasn't really thinking too fondly on carbs, but I didn't care, because I love my pasta, but also we were exercising, we were collaborating and competing as a unit, and we were bonding, which was the best part.
I mean, that's one of the things about Chelmsford, right?
Yeah.
Academically, I'm sure Mr. Halloran was nice, but I'm sure he also made sure that you were challenging yourself, right?
Absolutely.
And then Chelmsford High School is also known for sports, right? Like that you can belong and be a part of a team. And everybody remembers the dinners. I don't know how the parents could afford all the pasta dinners that they always had, but
right.
Was that something, though? I mean, you did it for 4 years. Was that something that really motivated you to have your success and feel comfortable taking the next step after you graduated and going to college?
Well, Honestly, it took a bit of a left-hand turn. I hadn't swam since then, honestly. I mean, at that level. I
Yep.
mean, I've jumped into swimming pools and all that stuff, but I've never done laps, and it's something I've been thriving to do again. And various circumstances have just kept me away from that. But one thing I wanted to go back to was actually earlier on when, I mean, I wasn't really thinking about speech classes or aids in certain classes, instructional aids. And it wasn't until my mom told me when I was 8 that I was diagnosed much earlier on, because she wasn't sure when the right time to tell me was, because how would I have been able to process it? Because I was young. I didn't really have any reason to think I was different. I had a lot of friends. I mean, I didn't know what autism was. I mean, I could tell people with disabilities still, like ones that are like, it's just very imminent. But all of my friends were typical. I was still hanging out with typical people, and I was still talking with them, and I just didn't really see a reason to feel different. Fast forward to middle school, I actually exited the district in 5th and 6th grade. I went to Innovation Academy Charter School. They were in like Eastern Chelmsford. Now they moved over to Tingsboro. And once they moved to Tingsboro, I came back for 7th and 8th grade, and I went to McCarthy. And it's funny because 7th and 8th grade were actually easier for me than 5th and 6th grade. And the reason for that was because I just didn't have any resources. However, when I entered what was called the resource room back then, and it's one step below the learning center, which are basic levels of most who have individualized education plans, I noticed there were people that were they weren't really at the same level as I was academically. Like, for example, I was very gifted in math. I love numbers today. And a lot of them struggled with that stuff. And I mean, I felt a little weird. And also a lot of my friends were in a lot more challenging classes. So I felt a little odd at first, but I managed to cope with it. And once I got to high school, my goal was to get into all typical classes. And to my satisfaction, by senior year, I still had an IEP, but I was able to get to those typical level courses. I moved up 2 levels in math over the course of 9th through 12th grade, which is something I'm very happy about. And I'm just happy I made it work.
Where do you think that you got the strength? Is that coming from your parents, or is that just somebody said something to you, gave you the encouragement? Because it all sounds like, even with your swimming, it all sounds like that you have this innate strength in you that's driving you.
Well, I've always wanted to challenge myself. A lot of people, so in high school, there's a 2-year minimum that you have to take a foreign language, and that wasn't enough for me. I still wanted to prove that I could do it, and I actually took the equivalent of Spanish 1 in 5th and 6th grade at the charter school. And because I hadn't taken it again until grade 11, I had a little bit of review, but I kind of had to go back to square one. But I wasn't willing to settle like a lot of the other people, like a lot of the peers I was having the same classes with, because that's just how the resource room was when I was there. I just wanted to achieve new levels of success, become a good role model, and just show that I'm able to compete, well, not compete with the big guys, but just score proficiently well,
right,
at the level that a lot of my peers that I am very fond of are at. And I mean, I just wasn't willing to settle for less. I just wanted to take as little help as I could and just do as much as I could comfortably.
So was that why your mom didn't really want to say anything to you, or didn't know the time, because she saw your inner strength and she thought, if I tell him something, maybe it'll take it away? But it doesn't appears that you've always had this inner strength that was going to be a non-stopper. Like, and is that why too, when you finished with Chelmsford, you were ready for college? Do you think because you just had that inner strength that you needed an extra challenge? It sounded like you needed to be challenged academically.
Yeah, they were concerned mostly about me succeeding, and the thing is, when I noticed that I had an IEP and I was being placed in all these classes, it was kind of restricting. The level of IEP I had was restricting how far I could go. So in senior year, I actually had to request to be moved up to the Learning Center, which removed a lot of the support I had in the classes, but it allowed me to take as many less remedial classes as I could. There was one class that I still had support in, but other than that, I was able to get through, no problem. And honestly, some points in school I felt like I was struggling because it was just me, but there were classes I was taking where I was struggling just as much as the other kids were.
Right.
So at some points, I knew it wasn't just me, and it made me feel a little bit better because I became part of the same group of people that were struggling, but at the same time, still wanted to push myself to just do well and stand out, but not in a bad way.
Right. So how was it to go to college?
Um,
Was it everything you thought it was going to be, the challenges and what you wanted to do and you were following your passion?
Honestly, college was a little easier than I thought it was, especially once I decided what I wanted to zero my concentration on. But let's go back to the end of high school for a little bit, because there's some stuff I need to discuss as far as that. I originally was going to go to Daniel Webster College for computer science, and literally during senior week, like the week of graduation, I decided I'm switching. I'm going to UMass Lowell because I knew more people that were going, and they had more of a reputation of success. And good thing I did, because 3 years later, Daniel Webster shut down.
Yeah, yep.
I dodged a bullet.
Yeah.
But also, I studied computer science for 1 semester at UMass Lowell, and I think they were looking for like a GPA or a track record of people to get accepted for the fall. They didn't accept me unless it was for the spring, but I still wanted to do something. So I went to Middlesex, I took a few courses that I would have needed to get off my plate anyway. So I got that stuff off, and I started with the introductory classes the next semester at UMass Lowell. And it was right there that I realized it was just a difficulty curve too much. There's just some things that you can picture yourself doing, and there's some that you can't. And I just learned coding was not my forte. And I knew I always had a creative eye. I always illustrated a little bit when I was a kid. In fact, in senior year of high school, I was taking requests from people that wanted to be illustrated. So I figured, you know what, maybe I could apply a more marketable side of creativity. So I went for graphic design, and that's what I got my degree in. And I haven't gotten a full-time job in that yet, but I've had a good number of freelance opportunities, and I have one at the moment. And with my podcast, I'm able to show some creativity with the graphics and whatnot, and it's just good to be able to have that opportunity and just build my portfolio even further and just show, as long as you have the determination, willpower, you're willing to just go all the way.
So talk more about the podcast. Where did that come from?
So I'm close. So there's a family friend I have whose sister has a podcast here, Kathy Murphy, and she directed me to the studio here, and she always believed a podcast was a good way of just getting my thoughts out and just being an inspiration for others, and just having people come on that have similar struggles to me, or people that study it. Like, I'm thinking of my next guest for my next podcast is going to be a doctor or someone that has studied autism their whole life, because the first guest I had was someone my age that was actually newly diagnosed. He was diagnosed like 2 years ago, but he was my age. I was diagnosed at 20 months.
Right.
So it was very interesting when I found out how late he was diagnosed, but that's a different story. But I just want people to sort of have a better idea of what autism is like. Because like with Autism Speaks, I don't want to diss on anyone right now, but Autism Speaks, they don't really have a good reputation right now, especially with just as a nonprofit. Like, people are like, why haven't you looked at Autism Speaks? And I'm like, I don't know. I don't know why I despise them. And I looked up their ratings on Google, and I decided I don't want to deal with someone that has a 1-star review on Google. So I figured just use this as a ground point and just elevate it. And I want to eventually get to the point where I can be going to middle schools, high schools as a motivational speaker and just show these kids, as long as you have that willpower, you can just achieve great things, and the opportunities are endless.
So and I say you have an inner strength, but there has to have been some people that have really like challenged you but said that you can do it. Like who have been your inspirations, or is it, family, or where is that coming from? Because when you give these motivational speeches, right, if you don't have it sometimes, right, like great athletes become because they have it, right? They want to achieve. And you sound like you want to achieve all the time. So is it a voice behind you, or is it just all of your inner strength?
Well, there are some motivational people. At home, admittedly, it was tough because I was the only person born on the spectrum. Everyone else was typical, and I mean, they do still have some support, but the relatability just isn't as much. A lot of my support factors have actually been outside the home, believe it or not. Teachers, a lot of the teachers from high school and college professors as well. Still very close with a couple of my college professors, and they really want me to succeed. And
so they've seen your talent.
Yeah.
Yep.
And the podcast isn't the end, honestly. I studied graphic design, so I want to have a creative design agency that puts emphasis on hiring diverse backgrounds, whether it's disabilities or people just don't have the chance, as long as they're high enough functioning, obviously. If they're not high enough functioning and they can't do the job, they can't do the job.
Right.
But I just want to present those opportunities that just aren't as prominent at the moment. And I mean, there's loads of things I could go on with, but if I were to go in detail, I'm sure I'd go over the timer.
That's all right, we got time. But so your design, is that your goal, is to have your own business? Is that what you think?
Yep. At the end of the day, I want to be working for myself. Not every workplace at the end of the day is going to be perfect, and I think that's sort of why entrepreneurs do what they want to do, because they work for themselves, they have their own guidelines, and they don't have to work about the pressure of working under other people. The pressure they have is the people they're working for. That's where the pressure comes in.
Right, but it also sounds like that you want to do this to be a giver too. Like you're trying to give back. I would think, like for the people that have supported you, and to give back and try to rally people that have some setbacks that shouldn't have setbacks.
Yep, absolutely. I want to give back. I want to give a portion of that money to a local organization or charity of my choice, like AANE, and they're based in Watertown. They hold social events, they hold hikes. It's been a little weird, the stringencies post-pandemic. I'm sure they're loosened up quite a bit now because that's all said and done at the moment. But I mean, I have met a few people through the hiking groups. Unfortunately, a lot of them just aren't on my wavelength. A lot of them just don't drive, or they're working like part-time retail jobs. I mean, they're just not as relatable to me. I made one friend from there so far, and ever since I made that one friend, we kind of just veered away from it because he was the only one I found from that group in particular that I could actually relate to on a big scale. And
You've brought up driving. So what was the setback, and how was it to get your driver's license?
honestly, it felt amazing once I finally got it. It took a minute to get it, but once I did, someone in my family actually told me before he had high doubts I would ever be able to work properly, graduate from college, or drive. So to do that, honestly, if you see that emoji that's purple and has the horns on the side, that was me. Okay. But also it made me feel very accomplished that I could do it. And I knew I could do it. It's just how much would the nerves actually get to me and what would actually be tested. But
So speaking of no nerves, so you got your driver's license. Talk to me about, didn't you go abroad and go to Italy and travel?
oh yes, I did. So I went to Italy for 2.5 weeks, 2.5 weeks. I visited Florence, Venice, and Rome. One of those days, my professor went around how many students were on the trip? Was it just, how many students? I think there were only 5 students on that trip, and I was the only graphic design person on the trip. The rest were fine arts. And my professor, so including her, there were only 6 of us, and then her husband and the kids came along for the ride later. She presented this opportunity to go to the Vatican to see the Pope speak, and no one wanted to go. She presented it to me. I'm like, I'm doing it. And she's like, you could just go over there and you could just meet us at the Capitoline Museum later. And I just said, all right, I'll do it. So I went, I took the subway, and I walked in a straight line once I'm off the train. It was so easy to get there, too. It was guarded up because, I'm not sure if you know, but Italy is a very well-protected country. There's military everywhere, so I saw a lot of that. But there was a big crowd of people. I remember it was 7 years ago. There was a big crowd of people there, and I was just trying to see where the Pope was speaking. And I walked by this American tourist, and he presented me this triangle, I like to say a triangle of light between a few pillars and a ceiling, and there he was talking. And so I now think of it as this magical triangle of light where I actually saw him speak. And I was actually active on Instagram during that time, and the headline of that post was, it was a beautiful speech because it was all in Latin, even though I couldn't understand a thing he said.
So what's one of your most memorable moments then, too?
Yeah, probably my most memorable moment, because I actually had to go into a gelato parlor to get internet service, to call my professor, tell her I'm trying to get back. She said, try to get a taxi cab. I had to fight for like 15 minutes over other people to get a taxi cab. And like I had to type in my rough Italian knowledge that I don't really have, where I needed to go. And I didn't care how much it was, how much money he took out of me. I just needed to get back to the group. And I did, but...
At that time, were you thinking, why did I spend so much time with Spanish? I should have taken Italian?
Well, the problem is I couldn't because it wasn't offered in high school.
Right, you would have, right?
I mean, I could have taken it in college, but I said if I didn't need to take a foreign language, then I just won't. It seems like I have enough of a challenge right now as it is.
Right.
I chose to study other foreign languages later on, actually, that aren't Italian.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
What other languages?
I've gone the Nordic route of Germanic languages. So on and off right now, I'm studying Norwegian, Swedish, and Danish. I want to study Icelandic at some point, but I'm not sure how useful it's even going to be because they all speak English over there anyway.
Right.
But I mean, the whole thing is the languages are very close to English because they come from the same Germanic roots. The hardest one is probably Danish because of the accent and certain consonants that are being skipped over. But I could go on and on about those languages.
So you've gone to languages, but do you still do anything with your math? You said you love numbers.
No, I wish I did more with my numbers. It's just, I have so many interests. Like, I could have chosen 4 majors in college. I had to choose one, though, and it ended up being design. And because I haven't found anything full-time there, I'm actually going to be going back to school for the summer. And I'm going to be doing on a part-time basis, a certificate program in IT, because I think if you know IT, you can pretty much get into any business.
Right.
And it's just, I feel like it could open up creative avenues later.
So what do you want to tell me? What's the name of your podcast, by the way?
My podcast is A Scoop of the Spectrum.
Okay.
And
then you do YouTube videos, or is that
Yep.
something we can watch? Or
yeah, you could. It's called the Fredster 32 or TF32, as I like to shorten it to. And I used to do game reviews back in the day, but now I do content on a game called GeoGuessr. It's a game where you're in the Google Street View world, if you know what that is. You're plonked somewhere random in the world, and you have to move around, look for clues, and try to pinpoint your location. And I do, like, most recently I've done stuff on a timer, and I try to do like multiple games trying to get consistent scores, which often at times takes luck, because a lot of times you'll get the worst possible location. Like, once I had a misleading clue on a bus, it said Missouri Valley, and so I plonk it somewhere in Missouri and it ends up being North Dakota. And it was an outtake. It didn't make it to YouTube, unfortunately, but you could just have the worst misleading clues possible. And it's like when you're excited to get all those points and it ends up being completely different, you're just kind of speechless.
well, is there anything else? Because this has been terrific. I truly appreciate you being here. And I've learned a lot, and I hope our guests can learn from it. And you're an inspiration. And so I know you're gonna. I like I said, you have a drive that not many have to have success. So I want to wish you all the luck there. And I want to have you come back when you've got your company rolling, because I think you're going to do that. And
Yep.
And certainly we would love to have you back. So I appreciate you being here. It was wonderful to meet you, and I wish you all the best. And you got your 10th class reunion coming back up.
Yeah, we do.
So enjoy that.
Yeah, absolutely.
Thank you. For everybody else, thank you. Freddie was a wonderful guest, and come on back and see Where Are They Now?